Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I call to order the regular meeting of the Menifee City Council. Please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember August. Here. Councilmember Furman.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Edgerton.
Here.
Councilmember Denver.
Here.
And Mayor Mann.
Here.
Thank you.
And we have invocation by Pastor Bob King of the Menifee Bible Church. Sir.
Join me in prayer, please. Our gracious God, Heavenly Father, we are thankful to be able to take this time to commend to you these, our leaders who have admonished us in Scripture. We just pray for those who have authority over us, and we pray, dear God, that you will grant them wisdom, as you tell us in Scripture. Those who lack wisdom can ask of you, and you will not withhold, but grant liberally. And so we pray, Father, for divine wisdom for these and the decisions they are faced with day to day. And we pray particularly tonight that you will superintend in this meeting, that all things will be done in an orderly manner, that the agenda will be accomplished without complications or difficulty. And we'll praise you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor King. Councilmember Furman, would you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you, sir. We have no presentations for this evening, so I'll entertain a motion on the minutes of the July 16 meeting.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Are there any changes? Are there any objections? So ordered. Are there any modifications to the agenda for this evening, Madam Clerk?
No, sir, it stands as posted.
Thank you kindly. We'll take public comment at this time.
Yes, sir. Ray Hicks.
Good evening, council members, Mr. Mayor, and the public. I just have a brief overview I want to give to you. Since our windstorm that we had in San Gabriel Valley in 2011, Edison's had a tremendous focus on communication improvements between departments as well as with the cities, and to improve your information flow for outages and such. Some of the external things we've done are flash communication drills where we invite mayors and senior staff to be on a conference call. We've tested this a couple of times, and we've got the means down to fully communicate with you on specific time frames if there's a large emergency. The presentation that I handed out to you goes through the different processes and information about it. And the most important thing, though, is to let you know that we're working with the cities. We have DVDs that we've delivered. Rob Johnson, I gave one last week to him for your staff on how we handle electrical emergencies. And I wanted to briefly let you know the priorities are first the police, then the fire, and then hospitals. And then after that, we're going to go for the largest numbers. And what that means is with our largest voltage systems, we work to get that up first, because it does no good to run new wires from the pole to the house if there's no voltage at the pole, because that circuit's already down. So we start at the larger voltages and come down. This presentation has that type of information. We're working with the first responders, with the police, fire, and AMR to get this out. We've also gone to the incident command system, and we're been required to do the 100, 200, 300s and series of training, and then the different ones as a liaison agent and so forth. There's a lot of good information in here if you just have a few minutes to look at it. But then the heart of it goes to this, that about 2 months ago I gave some notebooks called the Local Government Guides, and this is inside it. Within this is a summary. If you've got questions on how we handle things, if you look at this, it'll tell you my name and number is highlighted inside it, and on my name again in case you forget me, but inside where the phone numbers are, because we want to improve the communication. The most frustrating thing is when you call me and say, tell me about an outage. If I haven't heard about it, then I can't give you any information. And once I hear about it, I want to get back to you with correct information. So that's what this is about. We just want to give a heads up to you. We're very serious about doing this and meeting AB 56. No, that's yours, isn't it? That
1605, something like that,
I've been 1650. That's right.
1650.
We've been so involved with 56. So 1650. You know, we want to meet those requirements and provide a proper time and response to the city.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Seems like the Southern California Edison is elevating the game in their incident command process, and as we drill these things in the future with the city, we'll partner, obviously, in those recovery operations, because restoring services and operations after an incident is paramount concern.
Great.
So thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Next speaker, please.
Grant Yoder.
Good evening, City Council. Grant Yoders, Community of Sun City. Excuse the script, but if President Obama and Councilman August can use one, I guess I can too. I have several items that I want to talk about within my time frame. A couple of months ago, the city received a DFI windfall of well over $1 million, and it was stated that there may be more to follow. Mr. Mayor, you said at that meeting that the money would be applied to the Scott Road widening project. This project is not until 2015. Why not use some of that money now for some of our roads and streets that are badly in need of repair? Staff probably knows where these are without me listing them. Of course, your response will be that those monies will have to be earmarked for that project. But crafty and resourceful politicians know how to circumvent this system. Just ask our state and federal politicians. While on the subject of road repair, I would suggest that our interim city manager or one of his staff contact Lake Elsinore regarding a new asphalt road repair system that they just purchased. This new technological equipment and is said will revolutionize the industry. It eliminates contract work for it will be operated by city maintenance employees. I have the newspaper article right here if you would like to read it. Next item. I also read in the paper that Wildomar is giving some thought of breaking away from Animal Friends of the Valley. Their annual service fee is $240,000 a year, and they feel that they could go it alone. Since our fee is similar, maybe some dialogue could take place between our two cities, get a feel for what they might have in mind, and maybe form some kind of partnership. It's worth pursuing. Next item, code enforcement. I want to suggest that at least once a quarter that the senior code enforcement officer give a quarterly report at a council meeting. The staff is increased. We have been paying outlandish vehicle rental fees for the past 6 months. We are getting 3 new vehicles. It would be beneficial to be aware of their positive accomplishments besides removing and giving citations for signs. Next item, public and agenda comments. I have attended council meetings in other cities and supervisor meetings where the 3-minute indicator is a digital clock and on the podium or on the front of the dais. This certainly is an aid to the speaker instead of watching the dancing lights. Give it some thought. Next item, agenda comments. Agenda comments are always given before the presentation or discussion. Is this something that is mandated? There may be something a speaker may want to comment on after they listen to the presentation and were not aware of before the agenda item. Is there no flexibility? At last Tuesday's workshop, Mr. Mayor, you set a precedent and allowed speakers to speak after the presentations. The last item is for the
Mr.
past...
Yoders, that's your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yoders. Next item, next speaker.
And Pika.
The gag is off. I now speak freely. The values and freedoms that make this country great are threatened as never before in our nation's history, as is clearly demonstrated by the city clerk's refusal to release public documents. Not only is this condoned but encouraged by the city manager, city attorney, Mayor Mann, and the council members. When the council sits in silence after notification of such acts, you are condoning the illegal actions of city staff. I championed 3 of you in the last election because at the time I truly believed you would make a difference. But to my great disappointment, you have proven to be worse than the outgoing city council members. The Menifee Buzz newsletter neglected to inform the 30,000 readers of the tax increase this city council has placed on property owners. Council approved 2% trash increase per year for the next 8 years, approved 2% increase on assessments for property owners for landscape and lighting districts throughout the city, approved a $100 permit to replace a hot water heater, something Riverside did not require, approved a $170 plus permit to re-roof a house, approved increase on all public documents from 10 cents to 25 cents, approved increased costs of CD recordings from $1 to $5, plus a new charge of $25 just to fill out a candidate notice. And to top it off, 3 of you voted to give yourselves a raise effective 2014. It certainly shows who you are looking out for, and that is yourselves. Wally, your comment that you want everyone to know that you will spend every cent of that 100 increase in pay and enjoy it might be funny to you, but not to those on a fixed income who only get 1% increase in their Social Security after 2 years of none. Shame on all of you for your lack of transparency and your lack of fiscal responsibility to your constituents. You continue to run this city on a deficit budget for the last 3 years and continue to drain the city's revenues.
City Attorney, could you address very, very briefly the things that we're allowed to share incident to a public records request? Because we are limited. I mean, there are some protections for certain categories. Could you very briefly answer that question or that statement?
Sure. Public records are those records that are kept by the city in the normal course of business that are not confidential in any way and that are therefore city documents. All those documents are subject to disclosure, but they're also subject to certain exceptions, including exceptions for personnel records, exceptions for attorney-client privileged records, exceptions for a variety of other investigative reports, various issues like that. In addition to those, there are privacy concerns that sometimes arise, including information with regard to addresses of individuals or phone numbers or social security numbers, things that may be required by the city to be given in an application, for example, where the application is public record, but that private information would divulge private information to the public that is a violation of the privacy rights of the individual who submitted the document. So each time we receive a Public Records Act request, we must review it and determine whether there are exemptions that apply and whether the public interest in having all of the document outweighs the private interest of the persons who may be affected by releases of that document. We have done that. We have a process for doing that to evaluate each of the requests and to respond appropriately. We respond in a very timely manner. The city clerk is very conscientious about issuing responses, and we disclose the records that are disclosable to the fullest extent that we can.
Thank you, City. I appreciate that. And just a quick note about transparency. This council's been the most transparent council we've had since we established, so I find that comment a little bit puzzling. Next public speaker, please.
Dr. Shirley Johnson.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shirley Johnson. I represent the Southwest National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The following is a press release for an upcoming event. The evening in the park is just around the corner. It's August the 10th, 2013, from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's going to be at the Marietta Town Square Park. The event is going to consist of job vendors from Costco, Lowe's, and Best Buy. We have a fashion show. We have plenty of entertainment. We're going to have food. So if you're hungry or you just want to come by and have a good time, come by and say hi to us. We're going to give away free school supplies to all the students who show up. So this is our first event in Marietta. So we invite you all to come by and have a hot dog or a hamburger. Hi, Mr. Denver.
Thank you. Just a quick question before you leave. Did you ever find a place to meet in Menifee, Sun City area? I know you were looking for a place before, and do you have a place to meet now?
No, we do not have a place to meet in Menifee, and we're excited to come to the city of Menifee to have our meetings.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do about that.
Thank you so much,
All
Mayor.
right, thanks.
Yes.
Next speaker, please.
Those are all the speakers under your public comment section,
All
Mayor.
right, thank you very much. Council member updates and comments. Council, do we have any updates? Hearing none, on to the consent calendar. Are there any changes to the consent calendar? Hearing
10.5 for comment?
10.5 for comment. Are there any other items off the consent? Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on the consent calendar?
Yes, sir. May I call them now?
Do we have speakers on consent, or do we have speakers on the item that's been pulled?
We have speakers on one item of consent that is remaining and two on the item that was pulled.
All right, very well. I'll take the speaker for the balance of the calendar.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Pam Bishop?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilman. I just became aware of the fact that you're considering upping your stipend for the work that you do, and I think that everyone agrees that you guys work very hard for us, and it's appreciated. My only concern was that it appears to be that you're looking for a 400% increase in the amount of money you get per month. And as a senior on Social Security, wow, that'd be great. I think that everyone would agree that you deserve to have an increase. I would ask that you maybe consider it not to be quite as large as you're looking at right now. And that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Understand your concern and comment. City Attorney, could you address the increase as it relates to the population increase and that how our ordinance is just being aligned with the California Government Code?
Sure. The original stipend that was given to the council established at the beginning, it was in accord with the statutory requirement that it be no more than $500 a month, and that's what it was. From the time that the city formed until now, there has been no increase at all. Under California law, the council is entitled to a 5% increase per year for each year that the city is in existence. But that 5% can only be awarded in years when there is an election. So at this point, the increase is 5% for the first 2 years and 5% for the second 2 years, 5% for each of the second 2 years, for a total of 20% increase, which then gets added to the original 500%, or $500 per month. The total comes out as is set forth in the staff report, but there also during that time was an increase in population from 75,000 to 82,000. It was below 75,000 initially, and that ups the base that they were entitled to during that time period. So all of those calculations have been done. They're in the staff report. The increase amounts to $150 more over the 500, and that will be in effect not now, but in 2014, when the city has been in existence for, let me think, 6 years. So that's how that's calculated. None of the current seats, well, that's not true. Those people who are currently before you cannot receive an increase until there is an election. So that when there is an election, the increase will apply to all of them. But it's a very strict statutory standard, and we've abided by it in putting this together.
Thank you, Ms. Biggs. Mr. Edgerton?
Yes, appreciate your comment. To make it clear, it went from 500 to 600. That's a $100 raise. So I think 400 is, I don't know where you got that figure. I voted for it, and for those who know me, understand I certainly don't need the money. I'm very, very comfortable. But I didn't vote for myself for $100 a month. I voted for the position. I think when people run for council, $600 a month, it probably gives them minimum wage, perhaps, when you count the time in. But I do think, we talk about having problems with our public officials. I think Congress and our state officials are overpaid, but our city council people often are underpaid. And I think it would be helpful to get a lot of people started there. There's a lot of people who don't have a lot of money and they'd like to run for council. That extra 100 for them might mean a lot. And even though I might be doing very well, if somebody tried to take my Social Security away from me, I would be raising hell. But in any event, I appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Edgerton. Are there any other speakers on the balance of the consent? None?
No, just the item
Okay.
10.5.
I'll entertain a motion on the balance of the consent calendar, please.
So moved.
May I have a second? Roll call, vote.
Councilmember August. Councilmember Furman.
Aye.
Councilmember Edgerton. Councilmember Denver. Mayor Mann.
Aye.
Thank you.
On to agenda item 10.5, second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2013-128, amending the Menifee Municipal Code, adding Chapter 5.60 to prohibit mobile marijuana dispensaries necessary for preserving public peace, health, and safety. And we have two speakers on that item.
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Grant Yoders.
Grant Yoders, Community of Sun City. Since the last council meeting, you have had ample time to rethink your position on this ordinance, especially having heard several public comment testimonials. If you had a family member or a close friend who is dependent on cannabis, your reaction may be different. There is no law being broken here if it is being prescribed by a physician. The ban could create an inconvenience or hardship for those who are homebound or suffer from some disability. They will obtain it one way or the other. Mr. Edgerton, you spoke at the last meeting for about 5 minutes regarding marijuana legislation. You were quoted in the press. I believe it has its legitimate medical uses. It's a scientific fact. It's indisputable. You go on to say, I will support the ban again, though I will do so hesitantly. With all due respect, what the hell kind of a decision is that? Mr. August, you supported the ban, noting that you saw no great demand for the services. You were also quoted, nobody has ever called me on this subject. Of course you're not going to get any calls. Do you expect your phone lines to be flooded with calls identifying themselves as marijuana users? This is a private matter between patient and physician. To go a step further, are you folks going to establish an ordinance banning home delivery of prescription drugs by a pharmacy because they may contain narcotics? On the ridiculous side, how about an ordinance for the home shoppers banning delivery of cigarettes, beer, wine, and distilled spirits? In my opinion, you folks want to establish ordinances as a cure-all for all that ails the city. I know you all are aware of the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what we have here. It's not broke, but we will write a new ordinance to fix it. Mr. Furman, you are the only one who really got it right when it comes to enforcement. Drug stings or some busybody whistleblower neighbor. As a matter of fact, here lately, I commend you for your rational and objective decisions. As for the others, it becomes more personal. Whether you like or dislike determines your vote. Reconsider your vote on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Katie Manier.
Katie Manier, City of Menifee. Tonight I want to address a comment made by Wally at the last meeting. You stated that everyone in this audience has used pot at some point, and I want to clarify that for you. Everyone that was here should be outraged at the audacity to make such a blanket statement when you know nothing about our personal lives. I want to make it perfectly clear. I have never ingested marijuana in any form. I have no plans to ever do that. But I will let you know tonight, if I'm faced with a catastrophic illness, that might be an option for me. There are many people in this city suffering many of them with catastrophic illnesses. Several of them spoke last week or last meeting, which probably was a hardship for them to even get here and speak. You talked out both sides of your mouth last time, Wally. On one hand, you're telling young people to get it legalized, which doesn't seem like your job to do as a college instructor. And on the other hand, you're voting to stop delivery of it at all. Here's something from the CHP. As long as you have a recommendation, you can transport medical marijuana. In August of 2005, the CHP headquarters issued instruction to all commands that motorists who had a doctor's recommendation for marijuana consumption and who were transporting marijuana would no longer be a focus of California police. This new policy was brought about by a legal and successful suit against the state of California by attorney Joe Eifert and Americans for Safe Access. The suit was due to repeated instances of marijuana being confiscated during traffic stops by the CHP and repeated instances of motorists being issued citations for illegal possession. Maybe you were given orders on how to vote from someone higher up, and it would be nice to see someone on the council that can think for themselves and not just take orders. If you are taking orders, then you are part of the problem in this city. I'd like to ask how you plan to monitor the delivery of medical marijuana. Will you be staking out the houses of these people and checking every car that might come and go? Maybe they have meals delivered or friends and family checking up on their well-being. How would you identify a delivery driver or a vehicle that would be used for delivery? They don't come with the words marijuana delivery on the side of them, in case you didn't know that. Sounds like we're going to be doing profiling, maybe. Is every car that enters this city suspect? The number of gravely people will surely increase after all the years of biosolids, aka sludge, being dumped here, and that has been documented in the press and in many other places which you refuse to believe. You are all turning a blind eye to the problems and some solutions for the sick and dying. As time goes on, the sick won't be all old people, as you like to think they are. We have young people that are being poisoned with this contaminated soil, and nobody gives a darn. Then to the lady that commented on the increase in the salary, maybe she would like to see what benefits you get besides $650 a month. That might shock her.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other speakers on agenda item 10.5?
No, sir.
Mr. Furman, you pulled this off. Do you have any comments that you would like to make on this agenda item?
Sure I do. The reference that Ms. Manier, I got a copy of it also. It's very long, and it basically says this: the CHP, the short answer is to leave the people alone that have the medical marijuana cards and don't confiscate their drugs. The reason was another reason was the cost of enforcement to possibly enforce this ordinance, which really would take a sting-type operation. And I don't want to spend Menifee's taxpayer dollars setting up these stings and doing these police maneuvers and just spending our tax dollars. So the reason I pulled it off the consent calendar, because I wasn't sure if I voted for the consent calendar, if that changes my vote. So I really wanted to make sure that everybody knew my position on this. And I also got, I think, about 12 different emails that people were support what I said, and there was one guy that didn't. And I didn't know if possibly my fellow councilman might have a change of mind on this, so that's why I brought it up for a revote.
All right, thank you, Mr. Furman. That is your prerogative as a council member. Thank you for your comments. Mr. Edgerton?
First of all, let me finish this drug.
Is that alcohol?
This was provided to me by staff, by the way, and they mixed it. It's caffeine, and it's also from the cocoa plant. And most all your drugs come from vegetables or some kind of plant. I commented on it last week, and I certainly didn't want to state categorically that everybody smoked marijuana, but if you're in a large city among young people, most of them have, and I would say most of the people in large cities have. The reason I wanted to comment on it is I have a background in pharmaceuticals. I've been a pharmaceutical representative, and I've known everything from living in a very, very, really poor neighborhood to living in wealthy neighborhoods, and I've been a director for the Juvenile Delinquency Control Center at USC. That doesn't mean I'm correct, but I would suggest I have the credentials to be able to understand what this is about. First of all, as I said before, it is a fact that, and the reason I'm saying this is I don't intend to change my vote, but I do want to clarify why I'm voting with the majority of the council on this. But I do want to say scientifically, marijuana, it has medical benefits. The fact that it is illegal has denied our medical community from doing the proper kind of research on it for both bad and good. There's other things that probably could come from it that would be beneficial. We're not allowed to even research it. But if you talk about morphine, nicotine, caffeine, chocolate, amphetamine, these are all come from plants, probably. Aspirin came originally. That's how they found about it, was a plant. And I looked into it a little bit because I think the question really is not so much about the medical. Nobody's concerned about people who need it medically. Most people don't need it medically because most people that have cancer or any debilitating situation where they would need a drug. There are better drugs for them, but as I think everybody here knows, drugs affect different people differently, and there are some people where smoking marijuana will benefit them over anything we have, including medical substitutes, and for them, they surely should be able to partake of that. So if it's not about the medical, what is it about? Well, there are a lot of people who believe this issue is really not about medical marijuana. It's really about whether we should be able to all smoke a joint if we want to. So let me up the ante tonight so that I don't want to appear like a hypocrite. Am I opposed to people who smoke marijuana recreationally? No. And I can tell you scientifically, a little bit of marijuana isn't going to hurt you. I don't smoke it. I've never smoked cigarettes. I played sports, so I didn't stop smoking for, great reasons. The point is, I tried to look into this. I said, well, is it evil? Is it a bad thing? You can go throughout history and look at all your philosophers. They talk about nostrums and drugs, and they say the same thing. They say the same thing the Bible says. Go ahead and imbibe if it makes you feel good. Timothy says, hey, in the Bible, Timothy says, put down your water once in a while, take a little wine. But also the Bible advises you, as well as all the philosophers, as well as the medical community, that drugs are dangerous if you abuse them. The number one problem in our country is not marijuana, it's alcohol. And it kills a lot of people. The boy that lived next door to me was 16 years old. He was a good kid. He wasn't into pot. He just was a good kid. It was his 16th birthday. He wanted to celebrate. And so he got together with his buddies, and they were celebrating on his property. They were chug-a-lugging. Some of you have done that. I'm not saying you've done it, Katie, but when you're a young kid, sometimes you'll do that. It killed him. It killed the boy. He's 16. He'll always be 16. There's a memorial to him in his own yard. When you abuse these drugs, that's what the philosophers say. That's what the Bible says. That's what the Torah says. And that's what science says. It's okay to use these drugs, just don't abuse them. Some people will always abuse them. And so my point was that unless you get yourself involved in gluttony, which is what the Bible recommends that you don't do, to remember that the challenge is not the drug, but the abuse of the drug. And when you look at the rehab centers in this country, the biggest one is for alcohol. The next one is for nicotine. Nicotine is the most powerful drug that I can think of. Put a little bit on you and it'll kill you. And of course, after that is marijuana. If by making it illegal, I would hope people appreciate, and I think most of you do, understand the implication of organized crime. They push it on our kids because there's money in it. They crowd our jails. As you sit here tonight, 10,000 criminals are about to be released from California prisons, and some of them are going to come into your neighborhood. Why? Because our prisons are overcrowded. Why? Primarily because we have made marijuana illegal. It is just stupid. And by making it legal, you take the money out of it. You don't push it to kids if there's no money. And if you catch somebody pushing it, then yeah, you put them in the clink, but they're not going to do it if they're going to go to jail and there's no money, the same as it was with alcohol. So I wish you guys would put your emphasis where it belongs on our congressmen. I grant you for being concerned that they won't do anything. But that's where it needs to be, and that's where it needs to be legal. Otherwise, if you continue to leave drugs the way they are, your kids are still going to have it pushed on them. And it takes the romance out anyway. When you're a kid, it's romantic to do things that are illegal. You know, if we do things that promote, like this ordinance, marijuana, that's not a bad deal. People want to get marijuana. You know, if you want to know where marijuana is, go to a high school kid. Go over here at San Jacinto College. Tell them you're sick. You want a marijuana. Go to Tom's Wooden Nickel Ranch and tell them you're sick. Hell, they'll come running out with a free bag for you, I'm sure.
I got to speak.
Okay, we need to.
Okay, let me just finish with this.
Come on.
If you've had with alcohol, if you want to get alcohol, where do you go? You go to the drugstore, or you go to the market. That's where you ought to go for a cigarette with marijuana. Only it should be controlled by big cigarette companies. If you just willy-nilly legalize it, if you legalize it and leave it as it is, you're going to continue with a bunch of little kids pushing it, a bunch of little would-be gangsters pushing it. You don't have organized crime. This is a little town. This is Menifee. This isn't a big city. So you're not going to have organized crime coming in here, but you'll have problems. And you'll have problems with that drug that the police can't control because it'll just overwhelm them. So I just end with this. If you really care about your kids, if you really care about the misuse of drugs, go after your congressman and tell him to legalize it and then get it franchised so we take it out of organized crime and put it into legitimate corporations and then highly regulated. And I'm voting against promoting more of this stuff in Menifee where it's only going to cause problems.
Thank you, Mr. Edgerton. Is there a motion on this matter?
I so move.
And there's a, you
More
move,
comments?
is there any, well, go ahead and make a motion. Are you
Any
moving
more
approval?
comments?
Are there any additional comments?
Yeah, I'm going to make one more comment.
All right.
On what? On a comment Mr. Edgerton made early in his speech. He said he was voting with the majority. Do you already know how everybody's going to vote? And a comment.
All right.
I'm assuming you're going to vote the way they did last week.
All right. Is there a motion on agenda item 10.5 to adopt second reading, and you're moving approval?
I'm moving to vote on.
Okay, so are you moving approval?
No.
He's, he's moving to.
Well, somebody else make a motion.
Well, hang on a second. Let me clarify for you. Which, would you like to make the motion on this or not, since it was a 4-1 vote last time to introduce? And it's your prerogative.
All right, then I'll make a motion against this.
Okay. Is there a second motion? Is there a second on Mr. Furman's motion to deny this ordinance? Hearing none, is there another motion for approval of 10.5 for adoption of the ordinance?
Like to make a motion to approve 10.5
Thank
as
you.
written.
As moved and second, call for the question, please. Roll call vote.
Councilmember August. Councilmember Furman.
No.
Councilmember Denver. Deputy Mayor Edgerton. And Mayor Mann.
Aye.
Thank you.
On to our first public hearing for this evening, agenda item 11.1, Community Development Block Grant Program Substantial Amendment. Is there a staff report this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Terry Willoughby has a brief staff report for you this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I have a brief report on the public hearing. We are an entitlement community, and we had an annual allocation that was presented to you in May of 2013. That allocation was an estimate provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Because of the special circumstances at that time of the federal budget, due to the federal sequestration, the annual allocations were not available at that time. So we were provided an estimate, and that was used when you adopted the annual action plan on May 7th, 2013. On May 30th, 2013, HUD notified the City of Menifee that the allocation amount for 2013-14 will be $445,280, which is 20.52% more than we originally anticipated. This requires us to do an amendment to the annual action plan. This item has been properly noticed, and pursuant to the adopted citizens participation plan, and a substantial amendment has been prepared, noticed, and made available for review and public comment. With that, I'll go through some of the changes. For public services, we trued up the amount. We had originally taken part of that from the administration allocation, so we increased that to the even $60,000. The administration amount, which is a percentage of the annual allocation, because the annual allocation increased, the dollar amount for the administration component increased. A minor home rehabilitation grant program remains the same. There's no change to that program. The community facilities program for the K. Sinicero Senior Center Rehabilitation Project was increased from $84,112 to $111,224. That will be combined with other funding. The community facilities project for Lazy Creek Recreation Center Rehabilitation Project, you were asked to approve that in the original annual action plan. That was removed, and the funding was reallocated to the McCall Boulevard Sidewalk Project, which is funded you're being asked to approve an allocation of $65,000. So the original annual action plan was $369,000 total, and the current amount is $445,280. Substantial amendment will not change any of the public services funding that was approved at May 7th. And there will additionally be an estimated $252,920 in carryover funds that will be carried over from 2012-13 to 2013-14. Again, the annual funding allocation is $445,280. The recommended action is to conduct a public hearing and to consider adoption of a resolution approving the substantial amendment and authorizing staff to submit the substantial amendment to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This time I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council to staff only? No questions at this point? Okay, thank you very kindly. I will open the public hearing at time 7:44. Madam Clerk, could you confirm that this was indeed properly noticed, and did we receive any correspondence associated with this item?
I can confirm that it was properly noticed, and I did not receive any correspondence.
Thank you. Do we have any public testimony for this item?
No, sir, we do not.
I will close the hearing at time 7:44. Is there any council discussion on this matter? I'll entertain a motion then.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
On adoption of Resolution 13337, approving a substantial amendment for the 2013-14 Annual Action Plan, authorizing staff to submit the substantial amendment to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and designating the city manager or his designee to execute the documents. Councilmember August. Councilmember Furman.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Edgerton. Councilmember Denver. And Mayor Mann.
Aye.
Thank you.
On to the discussion items section of the agenda, 12.1, District 1 appointment of Planning Commissioner to fill a vacancy. Mr. August, this is your agenda. Do we have any speakers on this, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we do, Your Honor.
Okay, please proceed.
Grant Yoders.
Grant Yoders, and I still live in the community of Sun City. Mr. August, you have the right to pick and choose whoever you want for the Planning Commission. They serve at your pleasure, and you have the right to dismiss at your pleasure. However, the dismissal of Ann Pica was reminiscent of what Sue Christensen did to Mark Miller. Your action was more personal than professional. I say this because you could not stifle Ms. Pica's freedom of speech, especially when she spoke out as a private citizen at the first scoping meeting. If you're in your opinion, she was putting the city in a compromising position because of her remarks. She had only to abstain if a vote came before the Planning Commission. Mr. Edgerton spoke at both scoping meetings, and he still sits on the council. As for our interaction with Carmen Cave at the Planning Commission meetings, if, at my suggestion, you would have attended the meetings and seen firsthand what was happening, you may have not been so quick to react. Instead, you listened to the banner at City Hall and Carmen Cave. Well, Carmen Cave was fired, problem goes away. For your appointment, I left 2 messages with my recommendations on your voicemail at City Hall. No response. Of course, you will say you didn't get them. It is my opinion that the one truly qualified person for this position is Mark Miller. I say this for several reasons. The most important is that sometime during this century, the general plan will come before the Commission and the Council. It is also my opinion that he has more background and knowledge regarding the general plan than anyone at City Hall and anyone you appoint. His input would be a valued asset to the Planning Commission. Secondly, you were one of Mark Miller's most adamant supporters when he was unfairly dismissed by Sue Christensen, and you stood at this podium more than once condemning Ms. Christensen's actions. And thirdly, it would be your way of undoing a wrong and payback for her action. Of course, your choice has already been decided, but I hope your selectee is not easily intimidated. In conclusion, my first reaction to your dismissal of Ms. Pica was dismay. But after reevaluation, I want to thank you because she is now on this side of the dais and the gag is off. Her time was actually wasted on the Planning Commission, for in the past 7 months, there were only 5 meetings and never more than 2 items on the agenda, and 2 items only 1. I know this because I attended the meetings. I'm sure you want to put a spin on my comments, but you cannot do the Texas two-step and sidestep the truth. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Susan Rude.
I'm sorry, could you call the name out again? I couldn't
Susan
hear
Rude.
over the clapping.
Susan Rude.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Rude. I've been a resident here from Menifee for the past 25 years, also a 4th grade teacher here in the Menifee School District for the past 18 years. I am envious of your raise. We haven't had one in 7.5 years, so I'd love to have that $150 a month. Anyway, I've spoken at this podium before about my concern over past sludge dumping, on our farmlands here in Menifee. However, I'm not up here right now voicing my concern. It's about the open position of the Planning Commissioner, which I believe, if I'm correct, Mr. August, you hope to fill with Mr. Earl Phillips. This is the position which Mr. August, as you all know, took away from his previous candidate, Ann Pica. And I believe the Press Enterprise, as many have said in the article, stated that Mr. August was not happy with her opinion and comments on the matter, so he had her removed. You know, although I have no doubt that Mr. Phillips is an intelligent, highly educated individual, it does concern me that Mr. Phillips has such close ties with you, Mr. August. Clear back in February, Mr. August, you emailed me with Mr. Phillips' credentials, trying to convince me that the sludge dumping was of no concern because Mr. Phillips said so. Just because a person possesses high academic degrees does not mean that they are an authority on a dangerous activity such as sludge dumping. Mr. Phillips has not lived near the dumping sites, and he only has textbook opinion on the matter. I just believe that it's extremely important to include individuals on our planning commission who do not have that close a ties to council members. This will avoid creating a one-sided, biased planning commission, and the close relationship between Mr. August and Mr. Phillips concerns me. I question the integrity and the long-term goals of any council member who chases off others because they have differing opinions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Katie Manier.
Katie Manier, City of Menifee. I'm going to talk about a meeting I had with Mr. August. We had many discussions before you were elected to this council regarding the issue that I've spoke about here for the last 3 years, and I'm adamant about the sludge dumping in this area.
Now, excuse me, just before we go on the clock here, this is an agenda item regarding his appointment.
That's
not,
right.
Excuse me, please, just not about the sludge issue. If you want to speak to his appointment, speak to his appointment. Just want to clarify that.
That's exactly
Okay,
what I'm going to speak
please
about.
restart the clock. Good.
After Mr. August was on the council, he called, indicated he'd like to meet with me regarding this issue. And along with him came Earl Phillips, John Denver, and I believe the other gentleman was Marty Rosen, if I'm not mistaken with the name. Anyway, as we met, I was naive enough to believe he really wanted to hear about the issues, and he didn't want to hear a thing about the issues. It was to dissuade my opinion as to what I thought was right and what I thought was going on. I went prepared, I had documents, went to show them. Not one of the gentlemen there wanted to see or hear anything. Anyway, Earl Phillips is claiming to be, and I believe he's going to be the appointee, no doubt about it, because they are such good friends. Anyway, he's claiming to be some expert on the subject. If he were an expert indeed, he would have been at the sludge forum that the city had. It was filled with experts, and yet they weren't there. And I think in the... Did you have something you wanted to say, or am I interrupting you in your conversation?
Please continue. Please continue your statement.
Okay, now I've totally lost my train of thought. I believe Mr. August and Mr. Phillips should recuse themselves from all voting on development and projects that are being built here in the city. They don't believe there's an issue, and I think it would be unfair for them to vote on projects when they have no concern for the citizens' health.
Thank you. Do we have any additional speakers, Madam Clerk?
Not on this item, Your Honor.
All right. Councilmember August, you have the floor. Thank you. Mr. August.
Thank you. Over the past 2.5 weeks, I've interviewed 22 people applying for the position of Planning Commissioner. Several of them are in the audience tonight, and I want to thank you for applying. It was a pleasure to meet with you, sit and talk with you, and go over your experiences. You were all qualified for the job. Although very time-consuming, it was a very rewarding effort, meeting a very sincere, community-oriented, dedicated, and caring group of people, all wanting to help the city of Menifee grow and develop into a city that we can all be proud of. The backgrounds and the personal and professional experiences shared with me, varied, were impressive and a positive testament to all. I know it's a cliche, but every applicant was, in my mind, well qualified and could have filled the Planning Commission seat easily, and being a great credit to the city in doing so. I wish I could have chosen all of them. Choosing one over the others was a difficult decision. They were all good in their own special way and in their own special experience. I want to thank all of them and hope they will allow me to call on them in the future for advice and comments regarding the city's direction. That being said, people were correct that spoke tonight. I have chosen Earl Phillips. I have known Earl for more than a year and learned he has a very accomplished resume fitting nicely in with the duties of the planning commissioner. He is a resident of District 1. He's provided me with many professionally prepared point papers in the course of a year regarding state and federal guidelines and regulations on the environment and how it applies to the development and planning process. He provided me almost instantaneously information on sludge, on biosolids, water treatment, ecosystem, CEQA, soils testing, plan preparation, development standards, sequence, and schedule times in preparation for completion in many of the projects that are going on in the city of Menifee at this time. I've shared much of that work with my colleagues on the city council. Earl's an extremely energetic and enthusiastic person with a phenomenal work ethic. On many occasions, he's volunteered his services to the city and staff. He submitted to the city a variety of analytical and informational information, notes and comments concerning several environmental and construction projects, two of which were Santa Rosa Academy and the Audie Murphy Ranch project. His efforts have been, in several instances, well received by the city council and staff. Earl has demonstrated a sincere interest in participating in a meaningful way to the forward and positive development in the city's future. Earl has 15 years of county experience in a regulatory capacity, more specifically environmental planning and land use, environmental compliance management, and viable risk assessment, and many more certifications. Earl is a 33-year veteran of the United States Navy and Naval Reserve, retiring in 1992 at the rank of commander, with experience in governmental regulatory writing, and he's exceptional in that area, with experience in site assessment and mitigation, emergency planning and management. He was called to active duty, back to active duty after 9/11 regarding potential risks to the nation's infrastructure. He has a master's degree in organizational development, a BS in chemistry, and an AA in water technology. Earl, on behalf of the city and on behalf of myself, would you please stand, sir? I'd like to welcome you to the City of Menifee's planning staff. Stay standing. I think what's going to happen, I offered you an opportunity to say a few words tonight, but you would rather save them for the swearing in at the Planning Commission at the next Planners Commission meeting, and the city will be getting a hold and we'll be setting that up for you. And again, I want to thank you for participating, and I have no doubts you'll be a great planning commissioner. Thank you.
Congratulations, Commissioner Phillips. Well done, Mr. August, for a sound and full vetting process. I know you spent a lot of time with this, and I think you did a good job for what it's worth from me. We look forward to you serving there, Mr. Phillips, and doing good works for the city. Welcome aboard to the Planning Commission. And I'm sure we'll get you started here pretty quick, but I think Mr. August wants to say one more thing.
I apologize to you, sir, because now I think you're the second highest ranking member that's working for the city right now.
He does. He's got me beat by one pay grade. That's right. Okay, very good. On to agenda item 12.2, an ordinance number 2013-130, adding Title 16 to the Menifee Municipal Code, enacting economic development incentives and programs to promote economic development of Menifee. Do we have any speakers on this item?
We do, Your Honor. Shall I call them now?
Please.
Grant Yoders. Sir, that's the only speaker as well.
Okay, thank you.
Grant Yoders, Community of Menifee. I wasn't really prepared to address this item because I attended the workshop last Tuesday and I didn't think it was going to be agendized this quickly. But I just want to make a couple comments. I don't think we should go overboard with the incentives for new business. You know, some of them should be coming here or looking at our city on their own merits as opposed to a handout just to come here and set up their business. And secondly, what about the businesses that are already here? You know, maybe one business wants to decide they wanted to expand. Maybe will they get some sort of incentive to do this? And what about another instance, if we have Joe Blow down the street that comes in here and wants to set up his business in direct competition, and this original business sees his profit margin decrease by 50%, what are we going to do for him, if anything? He might just decide, well, I'll just pick up and go somewhere else, as opposed to taking it in the shorts as far as my profit margin is concerned. But anyhow, I'll speak more on this at the next meeting after I have an opportunity to review it.
Thank you. In terms of the expansion piece of this, Mr. Denver, we added that at the workshop, and that's included in the ordinance, the expansion of existing business. Mr. Edgerton?
Just a clarification, Grant, and the city manager can correct me if I'm wrong, but this does differentiate between different businesses. So the ones we want, we can provide incentive for. That doesn't mean we have to provide incentive for those that we don't want. But Mr. Johnson, you may.
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct.
Well, with that said, let's go ahead and proceed with the staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We have a brief update on the agenda item from Mr. Wyman based on the information and feedback from council at the workshop.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just a brief presentation regarding the Business Incentive Program. You may recall last week we had a workshop on this item, so I won't go through the whole item again, but just briefly go through some of the items. To bring it up again, these are all items and powers that the city currently has. This is just a policy statement on the item. This allows the city to go after and attract those items that the city needs and wants and the amenities that they are looking for. And the program works to incentivize those businesses that bring a substantial positive impact to the city. The objective of the ordinance is to be inclusive rather than restrictive, and all agreements would come back before the city council for approval. So I'll just briefly go through a few items. You are correct, Mayor, that language had been added regarding encouraging vacant landowners to move forward with their commercial development as was requested at the last meeting, and also for retention and expansion purposes for businesses. So the purpose, as I said, was to attract new quality businesses, create jobs, add amenities, generate long-term revenues for the city so it can help support the essential services, fire, police, and public services, and to improve the overall Menifee economy. The application process is that an applicant would supply qualifying requirements, provide applicant information. We would do a project analysis on the applicant, with the overarching question being, does this project substantially benefit the city of Menifee? The incentives and powers and approvals included in the ordinance is a flexible policy using multiple incentives where desired, allows the city to utilize a variety of powers to carry out the program. And the approval process includes the council ad hoc committees and the final approval by the city council. And that is just a brief recap of the program. If anybody has any questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Wyman? Could you for the benefit of the audience, could you please since a press report, it was in the Press Enterprise, they kind of got the story wrong. They took your example from the workshop for the BJ's restaurant, and they published it as criteria for every single other commercial enterprise. Could you just please briefly clarify that?
Certainly, there is not a particular standard for the program. It is based on a case-by-case basis, taking the analysis of the information provided by the applicant, where the city will do a full analysis to determine the substantial impacts and positive impacts on the city. So that's what the analysis will provide. The example I provided last week at the workshop was not the standard.
Just one example of how it actually works because it happened with them and we implemented it.
Correct. I just wanted to provide an example of how it might work.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Are there any other questions? I would entertain a motion to introduce.
So moved.
May I have a second? Second. Roll call vote, please. Thank you, Mr. Wyman.
Thank you.
Councilmember August. Councilmember Furman.
Aye.
Councilmember Denver. Deputy Mayor Edgerton. And Mayor Mann.
Aye.
Thank you.
Agenda item 12.3, approve agreement with Inland Empire Property Services Incorporated for general nuisance abatement services. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I thought this would be a great opportunity for our building official, Colin McNee, to provide some insight into how we go about finding new contracts, what his division and department in the city is dedicated to do, and how they go about their business. So Colin McNee will provide the item for you tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What you have this evening is a recommendation from staff to approve an agreement for general nuisance abatement services with Inland Empire Property Services. Over a little bit of background. The Code Enforcement Division circulated an RFP for general nuisance abatement services. The opening date for the contract submittals or the RFPs was May 21st, 2013, with a close date of June 13th. The city received 4 responses to the RFP: Ace Weed Abatement, Inland Empire Property Services, Inc., ODL Landscaping, and Visions West, Inc. Of the 4 bids, Inland Empire Property Services was selected as they could best meet the city's needs for general nuisance abatement services. The services requested under the RFP include, but were not limited to, weed abatement inspection on unimproved and improved parcels throughout the city, pool and spa pumping, cleanup, and trash removal. These are some of the examples of the type of cleanups and abatements that the contractor performs in the city limits. As you can see, there's before pictures on the top, and there's the after picture after the trash and debris has been removed.
Are those actual Menifee pictures? Or are
Those are,
somewhere
yes,
else?
those are in Romoland.
Those are yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are actual, actually, those were probably 2 months old.
Wow.
So, these are other examples of the weed abatement. You can see a before picture. The contractor goes out, takes a before picture, documents the parcel numbers, and then does an after picture. That's on the right-hand side. Also, we've given you a picture of some of the types of weed abatement that we are performing in occupied parcels where the weed abatement is just basically left. Property owners have abandoned the homes. So this is another example of the weed abatement that we do in some of the hillside areas where the contractor documents it, does disking. At this point in time, the contract is for general nuisance abatement services, does not include the demolition of buildings. If we perform any type of demolition, we'll be going out to separate RFPs and do competitive bidding. That way, if those contractors, we subject to contractor's license regulations, and also if we exceed the $500 mark on some board ups. So for the most part, this concludes our presentation. There is funds available in the account number 100-4332-51-431, and we're recommending that the city approve a professional service agreement with Inland Property Services, Inc. for the amount not to exceed $100,000. I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? Just, which account is that line item?
Code enforcement,
And
abatement services.
did we, in your budget, did we reflect the $100,000 not to exceed amount in the budget for the year? Or do you think, because I recall from years past, the reason why I'm asking is, I recall us, I think before you were on board, and when I was on board last time, is we exceeded our initial budget amount and we got into the $200,000 range. So it's from that experience that I asked that question of you.
We spent $200,000 last year.
Okay.
And didn't get to Quail Valley. We've changed how we're doing some of our code enforcement and our weed abatement. We're starting in Quail Valley this year. Some of the other areas within the city may not need as much weed abatement. That's why we're recommending going down to a $100,000 contract. There is additional funds, but we thought we would enter into a contract with this firm and leave some dollar amounts in case we have to do some actual structure abatement, and there's some additional funds left over in that budget amount to perform those activities outside of this contract. So the initial intent is to use $100,000, perform more inspections internally, and utilize code enforcement staff to try to gain more voluntary compliance this year rather than trying to expend $200,000 plus and still not getting to all the weed abatement parcels. So,
okay, thank you.
We'll have a better understanding after this year whether that was successful or not, and hopefully it is, and we're not going to expend as much dollars as we have in the past.
Makes sense to me. Mr. Furman?
Colin, I had one question on that one picture you had. It looked like they were weed abating vacant land. Aren't they only required to do 100 foot around the perimeter and save the sage? It looks like they took all the sage off that property.
100 feet around the perimeter and any roadways.
Next one.
And around any structures.
Next one.
Yeah, that's it right there. This right here. It looked like they took out a lot of sage there.
They have done, this is an old picture. They were up in some of the areas. We've recommended to try to stay away from those areas because this in turn just gives us a problem when we enter into the rainy season.
Yeah,
and we have to do an erosion control.
Yeah,
So,
but that's good quail habitat right
Yes.
there, I can tell you right now.
but keep in mind, our intent is to try to get as much as we can within.
Okay. All right,
about
just so
100
they're
foot
aware that
separation.
they only do perimeters on large parcels.
Yes, there's a 100-foot perimeter around the large
Okay.
parcels.
All right.
Well, we can take it out in the spring and let it grow for the fall hunting season, Tom.
Yeah. It takes years to get to that high.
Are there any other
Okay.
questions?
Thank
for
you, Colin.
Mr. McNee? Thank you very much for your staff report. What do you need from us, Mr. Johnson?
Seeking approval of the agreement tonight.
May I have a second? A roll call, please.
Councilmember August. Councilmember Furman. Councilmember Denver. Deputy Mayor Edgerton. Mayor Mann.
Aye.
Thank you.
On to agenda item 12.4, a discussion and possible direction of staff for any modifications to the current home occupation ordinance. Is there a staff report?
There is. If I can get the little clicker, we'll be in business here. As you know, earlier this year, the issue of home occupation, of the home occupation ordinance was brought forward, and the council indicated an interest in discussing it and understanding where we are, and then giving us direction as to where you'd like us to go in terms of making changes to the zoning code for home occupations. Just as some background, each zoning classification in Menifee sets forth the uses by right and uses that require specific permits, conditional use permits, variances, that kind of thing. Home occupations are a use by right in all the residential zones. So any changes to that ordinance will affect all of the zones, unless it's restricted to just some of them, but it does affect currently all the zones. Home occupations are generally limited to those occupations that do not change the residential nature of the property, because these are all residential properties. In Riverside County, all 28 cities have home occupation ordinances. We've presented you with a matrix of those 28 cities and analyzed those ordinances in terms of how they are applied and what they say, and compared them to Menifee. Most provide that a home occupation must be conducted entirely within the residential structure, and there can be no more than one employee other than the residents of that structure. This is a review of the numbers. Those that allow non-resident employees, 21 cities, excuse me, I put this together and it's wrong.
It's the other
21
way.
cities do not allow any employees. 7 cities permit 1 employee only. With regard to the change in residential character, all the cities prohibit anything other than incidental uses incidental to the residential use of the property. Operating within the residence, 20 limit operations to inside the residence only, so that there can be no operations outside, no use of garage, none of that. 5 allow use of the garage for storage. 3 allow use of detached accessory buildings. Generally speaking, for storage, some of them in fact allow operations, but only 8 out of the 20 allow any use other than within the residence. Menifee's ordinance is consistent with area cities and also limits employees to 1 and requires that the occupation not change the residential character of the property. Additional uses by right are allowed within residential zones. One of the things I attached to the staff report is a listing of most of the residential zones in the city of Menifee, and all of them have extensive uses other than just residential uses that are permitted by right. One of those that is permitted is the home occupation ordinance, but there are others that involve activities that are business generating or revenue generating, but again incidental to the residential use. In addition to that, more uses in residential zones are allowed by a conditional use permit, variances, plot plans, other approval permits, but those permits have conditions that are imposed, conditions reflecting, for example, if the property is going to draw traffic or it's going to require parking, then there would be conditions imposed to address those increased impacts on the neighborhood. And again, all of that is in the context of keeping the residential nature of the property. It's been proposed that the Menifee Home Occupations Ordinance be changed as follows. First, that use of accessory structures be allowed, that full or part-time employees be allowed, that parking incidental to business be allowed, that sunset of inconsistent businesses. I think that means that those that are currently inconsistent with the city's zoning codes would be allowed to shut down in 2013 without being prosecuted for the violations. And the provisional licenses could be provided for others. As you know, we have adopted a provisional license program that allows the issuance of a provisional license from now until December 31st, 2015, to allow currently inconsistent and unlawful operations to be brought into compliance with the codes. It was also recommended that the first fee for the home occupation permit would be $160 with a renewal of $80 annually thereafter. The effect of the changes is existing illegal operations will be able to qualify for business licenses. Existing, excuse me, it says exiting. I'm going to have to get a new typist. Existing illegal operations will be able to continue operating without applying for conditional use permits or variances or other permissive approvals. They will be addressed through the home occupations ordinance. Now, of course, the home occupation ordinance could include a requirement for approvals. So we're just saying, you know, generally what happens here. All of that really comes down to the direction you give us. Existing illegal operations will obtain the ability to operate businesses as a use by right on residential property because they will fall within that ordinance that applies to all residential properties. And again, a lot of that can be restricted depending on what you choose to do in terms of the changes. I'm just giving you a bare bones, what if you did all of these things now in the existing context that we have. Other options, one of the things that could be done to address some of the needs that have been identified is to revise specific zoning classifications. Currently, there are, as I said, extensive uses by right that are allowed. New uses by right could be allowed. A rural residential overlay of some sort could be created that would allow certain uses in designated rural residential properties. There are a number of planning tools that can be used to address specific needs. You could require the conditional use permits, variances, or other regulatory approvals, and that currently is an option. And you can retain the current standards. And it's up to you at this point to give us some direction as to what you'd like to do here and explore the needs and explore the consistency of those needs with the future you see for Menifee. And that concludes the report.
Thank you. Mr. Furman, we have a speaker or two. Would you like?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. We have speakers, Madam Clerk?
We have a speaker, yes. Tony Falco?
Council, Mayor, good evening.
Good evening.
I think most of you know who I am. My voice is pretty distinctive, and my name's pretty distinctive. I'm here on behalf of the business owners of Menifee. Menifee's a cute, beautiful little town. We became a city, and I'm all for the city, and I'm all for cityhood. In that cityhood, we had small businesses. Small businesses then were promoted to grow. In an economy that nobody said we could do anything in, an economy that was down, I've grown. I am one of those businesses that have issues with having a business that has grown, and I'm in a rural residential. I had code enforcement before the city became a city, or as the city became a city in the beginning, and came to my residence and said, Tony, move to the outskirts of the city limits where there's property. I said, fine. My business is a service business. I do not ask for general public to come into my doors. I don't want general public to come into my doors. If so, I would be at a mall application like there is over here across the street. But I service plumbing. I work for insurance companies, and I also have Menifee Plumbing as a service business. If you don't allow businesses like myself, like AirPro, Steve at AirPro, if we don't have businesses here that are servicing our local businesses and local community, we're going to ask for out-of-town businesses to come in and service that. That means that we're sending our money elsewhere. Why? We don't have we don't have commercial buildings or industrial parks built yet. The city has to catch up with the growth. Until that time, I beg you, the council people, the leaders of our city, to reconsider the zoning and allow small businesses to have not necessarily public traffic, but have a few employees, have that chance of growth, because when them buildings are built, then we'll have the income and the money to spend to buy that building, to keep our local businesses and the money for our local government and our town here and keep it in our city. Because if we let that go, we're letting go the dream, this city that you're trying to build, wither away. And I ask you and I beg of you again to reconsider that zoning law. Allow businesses. If you have to give a special conditional permit, fine, get a conditional permit. If you ask additional fees, then take them additional fees to operate. But because a business is growing, you're not going to punish that business and say, okay, we want you to move out of the city now. I don't believe that's right. I just ask you to reconsider that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have another speaker?
Yes, sir. Casson Klein?
I apologize for the late entry. This issue is not unique only to Menifee, any growing city. And certainly, as someone who has my own business and my family has businesses that are home-based, I understand that. But the question I have, as someone who represents a developer that's spending tens of millions of dollars to bring in infrastructure, and a business park, industrial park, that Mr. Falco may come by one of our buildings, if he can operate, or if, I don't want to single him out, but using as an example, if someone can operate an industrial type use in a rural residential classified land at rural residential road standards, which may not accommodate that traffic, what motivates him to take the leap and spend a lot of money to buy an industrial building? The people that were coming in and putting in the infrastructure, building a mile of Ziders Road, completing the intersection of Scott and Hahn, and contributing millions of dollars to TUMF. Therein lies the challenge that you guys have. I'm not weighing in for or against. I'm just adding to looking at all the things that I hope and trust that you guys are going to consider. There's a lot of consideration that goes into this. Just the initial thought that I had was, you know, how do you address CEQA? Like I mentioned, traffic impacts, mitigating, you know, if you got a commercial use, but you don't have your circulation element in your general plan to accommodate commercial uses, how are you going to pass that CEQA, that environmental requirement? So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Are there any other speakers?
No, sir.
Mr. August, did you have a question of a previous speaker, or can you couch, it's not a public hearing, so we really can't necessarily ask questions of speakers, but could you couch it? Could you couch it and frame it in a way that staff can answer it, maybe? If not, I'm going to call upon Mr. Furman next.
So I can't ask Mr. Falco a question?
Not at this
Okay.
juncture, yeah. Okay, Mr. Furman.
Okay. Well, Tony, I couldn't kind of agree with you more. You know, I could probably tear up my speech because you said it already, you know. But the home occupation ordinance seems to be too restrictive. The home occupation, as is written, is absolutely great. I don't want to change. It's great for your housing tracts, your small parcels. You don't want people working in their driveways, working out of their garage or backyards where they can be seen by their neighbors. It's great. But in the city of Menifee, it doesn't seem to work on large parcels of ground. All right? We have so many businesses, nurseries, landscapers, sign makers, wood carvers, suppliers, pond and pool maintenance, building contractors, dog groomers, detailers, antique restorations, air conditioning repair, welders, tree trimmers, horse trainers, horse boarders, haulers, weed abaters, handyman service, and so many, many more. Okay? And these people all make use of an accessory structure, and they have an employee or two. That's what they do, and that's what they've been doing for many, many years. Now, the choices are, as Ms. Biggs says, it's CUPs, plot plans, or we modify the home-based ordinance to make accommodations over a period of time. We're not saying that it's going to be written in stone, but it needs work, it needs tweaked, okay? Now, we made the provisional business license, okay? Now, what we have to try to do is remember what the discussion is. We want to work on the large parcels of ground that have been here for a long period of time. Okay? What can be done to weld the provisional license and the home-based business ordinance that will work in our town? Okay? I don't want to put guys out of business. I want to give them a chance. And another comment, if I wanted to do what other cities are doing, I'd join the Army, really. If I want to follow somebody else, I want us to be leaders. And I want to save this unique royal lifestyle for a while and preserve it. Now, I would like to hear comments from my colleagues before I make a motion.
Mr. August?
I'm told I can ask Lisa a question.
Okay.
And listening to what Mr. Falco said and referring to what Tom said, Mr. Furman said, there are provisions already in this city to accommodate what Mr. Falco was saying. The only disagreement I see with him is about the number of personnel that he has on the property. But I believe he said he's willing to go through the conditional use permit process. He's willing to pay for fees. And I think what Tom's asking, and I think we should talk about the sunset provision that he's talking about, because to me that's totally unacceptable, and I think we should probably rule on that one first. But we do have a provisional business ordinance, and it's 2015. I'm all for working, as long as Mr. Falco says, hey, I'm willing to go through the processes that the city offers, you know, the plot plans or conditional use permits. I don't see why we can't work with that. But to sunset everything and require nothing from anyone in the future, I would not be for that. Okay?
Any other comments from council? Yeah, you have the floor, Mr. Furman.
I'll make a comment, and I have to rebuttal on what Mr. August says, okay? The provisional business license says you must comply with the home occupation ordinance. or you don't get a provisional business license or a CUP. That's already written. Unless the home occupation ordinance is changed, okay, Tony will never be able to get a business license because he's in violation, because he works outside his dwelling and he has an employee. Now it's up to us to determine if we want to change that so he can be legal. Getting a CUP and all that other stuff, he's still in violation of the home occupation ordinance.
Okay.
Scott, I mean, Mayor?
Ms. Biggs, could you had your light on first?
Yeah, perhaps Lisa can help me out here. But the conditional use permit would allow whatever we allow under the conditional use permit. Lisa, you want to chime in here?
Sure. Home occupations are allowed by right. There's no planning approval required. You don't have to file an application for a plot plan or a CUP. You can just do it as long as you comply with the rules. You do have to get a business license, but that's all that's required. Now, there are other uses in the zone that don't fall under a home occupation, that fall under other allowed uses. If you look at the package that Julie prepared, the city attorney prepared, there's lists of allowed uses that you can obtain a plot plan for outside of a home occupation, or uses that you could obtain a conditional use permit for. It's not considered a home occupation if you apply for it under the plot plan or the CUP. Does that clarify it a little bit?
Yeah. One question, Lisa. Are these businesses under the home occupation that they're allowed, are they allowed to work outside their home?
Under the home occupation rules we have right now, the business has to be conducted within the home or
Right.
the garage.
So,
But if the zoning allows for the type of business they're operating with a plot plan or CUP, they can apply
Right.
for the plot plan or the CUP.
okay, so we have a couple hundred people living on an acre or more that we're going to have to run 100 different processes through the CUP type requirements. All right, this is what we've discussed this. We've discussed this many times. Scott and I have discussed it, and there's no alleviation for the small guy, the wood carver that carves statues in his backyard. He's not allowed to do that in his backyard.
He can do it in his garage.
He can't do it in his garage because he's working with big trees, okay? You can have an answer for a lot of things, okay? You can't put 3 sewing machines in a garage because your car's parked there, okay? You can have individual answers for a lot of scenarios, but let's have one solution that's going to cover most of the scenarios, all right? Now, I'm going to stop this discussion because you basically realize the home occupation ordinance is being violated by people on large pieces of property. All right? This is the one we have to work with to accommodate Tony and many other people. Okay? There has to be relief in the home-based ordinance, or they don't qualify for a business license. Okay? Let's get some other comments.
Okay. Mr. August, you're up. Yeah. Mr. August.
I'm not sure what Mr. Furman was saying. Are you saying that they should just sunset, let everybody do whatever they want? Well, you're talking about little people, so the little people that have little businesses, if they can't qualify for home occupancy, they can't afford to go out and get a conditional use permit or variance or anything else. So therefore, they are out of business. Is that what you're saying?
That's what you're lending this crowd to believe, that they must go out of business.
No. If we were talking about Mr. Flacco, he said he's willing to go out and get a conditional use permit. And
He's only one of 100.
well, he's the only one here speaking tonight, Tom.
So what? There's other people out there. I rattled off 50 different people that I know that work in their backyard.
Okay.
Or work in an accessory structure.
Well, they're not here. That's my point.
I know
Mr.
they're not here
Flacco is.
because they don't understand the depth and breadth of this discussion.
All right.
All right? They don't. Okay? And I know there are some people in this audience that do work. They do. But they don't want to raise their hand because they don't want to be pressured. Now, if there is any other comments before I make a motion.
No, I have another comment for you.
We have some more
We
discussion.
have
Okay, let's have some more
Let me finish you up. Now, these small people that you're talking about, what about the people that have played by the rules and have businesses that they have permitted and played by the rules of the city and the
Agreed.
county? What about those people? If you start approving this, wait a minute, let me finish.
Go ahead.
So you start approving all these little operations throughout the city. What about the people that have played by the rules? Isn't there kind of an unequitable condition there for the people? Why are you giving a favor to small people and penalizing the people that have played by the rules?
Is that a question to me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
right.
a discussion amongst the council,
Right,
so
this is a
fire for
discussion.
effect.
Right, fire for effect. What you have is possibly the people that played by the rules come into the city after we were a city. There's people like, Tony, how long have you been here?
Been here over 10 years.
10 years. I know people that have been here 20 and 30 years. Okay, they come in under they started their home occupation building business 20, 30 years ago. I want to bring them. I don't want to put these people out of business. Okay? I want to accommodate them in the easiest way we can. Sure, there's going to be a set of rules that they have to play by. Okay, they're going to have to apply for the provisional business license. But there's going to have to be changes made and rules set up. And in the provisional business license, there are conditions that they have to follow. They have to agree to do things. That'll be covered when they get their provisional business license. But if you'll put them out of business if you don't allow Tony to work outside his house. He can't do it. And I can rattle off 50 other people that I could bring here. I could bring 50 people and fill this room, okay? But I said they don't need to be here now because it's just a discussion. All right? I can fill the room with these people. I can offer to drive you around the city and show you 50 of them, if you'd like. I'll take you on a cruise. I will. I'll show you every one of them.
Okay, Mr. Edgerton, you're up.
Well, I'm certainly sympathetic to what Councilman Furman is saying, but we could also fill a room with people who have objected to an imposition on them in reference to traffic, in reference to noise, et cetera. I lived in the rural area on the other side of 215 for 15 years. And Tom, I would agree with you. I think if we could differentiate between the tract areas and the rural areas, that might be helpful. On the other hand, I was just talking to Councilman Denver a few moments ago, and he brought up a point. Well, we should be working with zoning. In other words, we should make it fit. If you have a business that's going to be imposing upon traffic or imposing upon property values on a 5-acre piece sitting right next to a very large residential tract, how do you approach that? And therefore, my inclination right now is to listen carefully to what Councilman August said. I'm certainly prepared to tweak this, as you say, particularly for people in the rural area. But I think Councilman August makes a good point. You just don't have an open season for people doing anything they want. We have to have order. We have to have rules. We have to have regulations, not to impose it upon the people who are maybe being less than cooperative or who even want to be cooperative. But because we owe something to the many people who live around them, and they're concerned about their property values, they're concerned about noise, they're concerned about traffic, and that's my concern. I'd appreciate if Councilman Denver would clarify a little bit on what he meant by zoning. I think I know, and I was inclined to agree with him.
Last. Take me last.
Okay. Can I have a turn? I have a couple comments. I've been studying this issue for a long time, all the way back to when I was on the council the first time. And what I see, first of all, I'd like to commend staff for the very thorough examination of all the cities in Riverside County. For me personally, as I studied the staff report, it provided me with an opportunity to compare, what the other cities do versus what Menifee does, and we're very, very consistent with what everybody's doing. There's nothing out of order, so I want to thank you for that. I'd also like to thank and commend Councilmember Furman for his zeal to represent the rural business owners. I know it's been something that's on the forefront of your mind way before you even got on the council. You've given them a voice and you've put forth some creative ideas and for all of us to consider, and we appreciate those. I'm most appreciative of your yes vote, though, on the provisional business license ordinance earlier this year to provide these business owners a path to compliance. With that said, though, I do have some concerns about the proposed changes for the home occupations ordinance. I think it needs to be in a different place. I think if we were to change the home occupation ordinance to anything other than it is right now, I think we're going to have some unintended consequences that I see on the horizon if they were to be adopted. If we were to make these changes, I'm afraid it would merge the definitions and skew the definition of uses of residential areas with that of just, say, a regular industrial park or a commercial center. So I have 6 specific areas of concern that I'd like to share. And I'm glad, Tom, that you had read off of our own zoning ordinance, because there's a 6-page list of commercial uses under the rural residential zoning of our own ordinance. All that has to do is you have to have a conditional use permit. If you want to build an airport on your property, you have to file a CUP. So if a business is currently operating illegally, per se, without the proper permits and what have you, that's why we did the provisional business license ordinance, because it provides a path to compliance. I'm going to add a little bit to what Mr. August said. If we were to add these proposed features to the home occupation ordinance, the city would create, in my opinion, an unfair competitive advantage to the businesses that legally obtained all their proper permits under the proper land uses and are operating in an area zoned for commercial business. Let me give you an example. I'm not going to use you, Mr. Falco, I promise. But if another business owner who were to say spend $10,000 on a nice sign, some signage to bring in customers to his business, his competitor who was granted relief by potential changes in this ordinance would only have to hang a $50 sign that he can make at Staples, and he puts it on his fence line as people drive by. So he, rather than spend the $10,000 to compete for that signage, he can instead spend that on inventory, tools, equipment, et cetera, and that gives that owner a competitive advantage that I don't think government should be in the business of doing. It's not fair, it's not right, and it creates an inequity, and we should not be in the business of doing that. My second point is, it was mentioned by a couple speakers, contributions to infrastructure. If we were to add these proposed features to the home occupation ordinance, the city would have no mechanism to ensure that the business owners contribute to the required infrastructure like they do now for a CUP, a variance, a general plan amendment, or what have you. Under the proper application and permitting process, an illegal business has the option to file for a general plan amendment, or file for a variance, or file for a conditional use permit, and we lowered the fee. We lowered the fee for a conditional use permit from $10,000 to $2,300, and under the provisional business license ordinance, that $2,300 conditional use permit gets discounted another 50%, down to $1,100. I think that's a great compromise. Would you rather spend $1,100 than $10,000 for a conditional use and get your business compliant?
I'll do both.
I appreciate that, Tony. I think that that would exacerbate the unfair competitive advantage as well. Speaking to the CEQA challenges, I think that if we were to add these changes to the home occupation, the city would expose itself unnecessarily to litigation under CEQA by allowing businesses to operate in an area without proper land uses and underlying zonings, and that includes the permits that comes with it. This would create another inequity by allowing a business to operate outside of the scope of the city's general plan, which, as you know, requires CEQA approval through the EIR process. The city should not be assuming that risk, in my opinion. There's also impacts to water quality. If we were to add these proposed features, the new ordinance would potentially expose the city to additional unnecessary liability if certain businesses are allowed to operate without contributing their fair share to the MS4 permitting process in the city. And the city should not be assuming that risk either without proper mitigations from the business owner. And I see Tony shaking his head with 2 thumbs up on that one. So I think it also presents some enforcement challenges over what we have right now. The home occupation ordinance is very, very clear. It's confined to a residence with a garage, and anything beyond that, it's not a home occupation. If we were to add these proposed features, how would we monitor or enforce this? We already have illegal businesses that have more than one detached structure as part of their business footprint. If we adopt this ordinance and say that you can only have one detached structure as part of your business, as an example, how would we enforce that code for those who have more than one structure? If we adopt these changes, I believe that we create yet another challenge for our building and safety department, similar to what we have with the storage container issue. Let's simply enforce the municipal code that we already have in effect. And that brings me to my last point, the provisional business license ordinance and the city's zoning ordinance, which we've already talked about. You know, we've already given these types of businesses a fair and equitable shake by providing them a path to compliance that extends all the way out to 31 December of 2015. And if you recall, that ordinance passed unanimously 5-0. This extends the total time for a business, such as Mr. Falco's, sorry, a total of 7 years to get compliant with the municipal code. 5 years since incorporation and another 2 years with our provisional business license ordinance. The program includes acknowledging that the owner that they're not in compliance. It grants them a provisional business license, and it also discounts all the fees and permits up to 50% to help them comply and mitigate their business footprint. Moreover, the existing zoning ordinance allows certain commercial uses in rural residential areas. I mean, it runs the gamut. There's 6 pages from an airport landing field all the way up to commercial breeding operations and everything in between. And plumbing businesses and air conditioning businesses and you name it. Commercial horseboarding is another one that's contained under that. So the provisional business license ordinance coupled with the zoning ordinance, in my view, already provides our business owners who need help getting there with a path to compliance. And it would probably solve almost all of our challenges if we would just say, here's what we need from you, apply, we'll work with you, let's get it done. Now for me, I'm unwilling to undermine the provisional business license ordinance, and I'm unwilling to undermine the zoning ordinance by giving someone a free ride by changing the conditions under the home occupation. For me, it all boils down to risk exposure to the city, proper infrastructure contributions, proper mitigations and permitting, and a local government that seeks to create an unfair and inequitable competitive advantage by adding these features to the existing ordinance. Government should not do that to businesses that choose to operate in a legal and ethical manner under the code and under the proper land uses and in accordance with the proper zonings. It's for all of these reasons that I cannot support the changes to the home occupation ordinance as it's currently written. However, I would more than welcome an exploration of reviewing the rural residential zonings to see if we can expand those that would make it more palatable for some businesses. But what I will not compromise on a conditional use permit, a general plan amendment if it's required, or variances where these businesses have to mitigate the impacts on the neighborhoods that they're operating in. So that's where I'm at tonight with this. Tom, you're up.
Could I ask Lisa a question?
Yes, staff, absolutely.
Okay. The proposed fee under the provisional business license of 50% of 2,300, okay. Would that be enough to solve Tony's problem?
Well, I think that's kind of an unfair.
No, I know it is, but.
As an example.
As an example, okay, Tony, do you mind us using you as an example? No, right. Now, you know the situation, okay? He comes in and pays for a conditional use permit, okay? Does he have to do a general plan amendment, a zoning change, and all that costs more money on top of that?
If the use is allowed in the zone, we would not require a zone change or a general plan amendment on top of the conditional use permit. Now,
So you're pretty sure that the reduced fee on the CUP would cover these businesses?
I would have to ask our finance director whether or not the fee is reduced 50% across the board, or if it's still the deposit based.
Would it, if you would bear with me, could we, before we decide anything on this, could we do an example? Could you run through and give an example of everything that would be required to get this CUP to bring somebody into compliance? What would it cost staff? Can we do that? Just do an example.
Mr. Johnson?
I think that's a fair question. I'm very uncomfortable with how we're proposing to do this right now. If you'd like us to come back and do that, we're more than happy to do that. The other issue I have is, again, this is not a one-size-fits-all. So as you're mentioning, the reduction in fees are fee-based. So if it's fee-based and not a deposit, then it would have to be covered under the fee. If it's a deposit that's been reduced, the amount that's needed to cover the entire process could be higher than the deposit that's initially given.
Right.
So I'm very uncomfortable in talking about this with a wide variety of possibilities, because I don't want people to get the impression that it's a one-size-fits-all, because it's not.
Right, I know it isn't.
So
Right.
I'm trying to give some latitude and have staff answer, but I don't want to give the wrong impression.
I would like, if the council would bear with me, to put this off, to do a study. Just pick a business, and Tony would volunteer his business, or Steve Segoya would volunteer his business, do a mock, what it would require for him to, you're doing a PAR, so to speak, right?
Mr. Johnson?
We do a PAR to just really find out on
What's PA? What do you mean by PAR?
Pre-application review. You should know that.
I thought you don't.
Again,
Yeah.
Again, I don't believe that's an issue for us. If these two gentlemen are willing to do that, we'd be more than welcome to help them. The issue that I have, again, is they're probably, and I don't even know the situations that they're both in, they could be in two completely separate areas of the city,
Which
in
they
two
are.
completely different environments,
Okay.
which have
They are.
completely different conditions, which have completely different requirements under their CUP. So, again, we can do it, and we'd be more than happy to help them. I think we've done it for both of them before, at least once or twice. No,
I don't know,
and,
but
and so
the council hasn't been privy to that.
and of course, you wouldn't be, because we're talking about policy issues versus staffing function. So we're trying to make a policy issue out of information that you're getting from a staffing function. So we don't have any problem with that. We can share that with you, knowing full well one size doesn't fit all.
Right.
Mr. Denver and then Mr. August.
I really disagree with postponing this vote. The fee on this thing is a very small part of the issue for me. It is very, very small part. We can work on the fees. I don't think you and I have a disagreement in the world that all our fees ought to be lowered, but I think we ought to have that discussion separate from this. The issue has very little to do with fees. It has to do with doing commercial and industrial that affects the neighbors in areas that aren't commercial and industrial. It's a matter of changing the zoning by letting just the people do as you would like, in my never to be humble opinion, kind of do whatever they want to do, whatever they feel they need to do. You want them to be able to carve trees and do car work in their backyard and the side yard and the extra building they put in. And it's a bigger issue. That's the issue. And I think we ought to vote on that now. If you want to talk about money, I'm ready to bring back up the funding again and let's cut all those fees in half. I'm ready to do all that. But it's a totally separate issue.
Yeah.
Mr. August?
Yes, I would be very much opposed to what Mr. Furman just suggested, to bring two people from the community in here and have their personal, private business of businesses put before the city. I'd be opposed to that. I do agree with Mr. Denver, and I do agree with Mr. Mann. There are ways and there are avenues, and Scott so expertly and eloquently stated to all the people here that there is a way, there is an avenue. We're here to help the people, but to change the home occupancy ordinance would just create a can of worms for the city. So I would say we let we don't go along with the proposed changes in the HO, and then work come at this from a different direction. And those are my comments.
Mr. Furman?
I actually think that there's a lot of smoke being blown around myself. The cost and the aggravation and everything that's implied here is going to be tripled once you start into a process. All right. This problem is too big, I think, for our minds to make a decision right now. I would like to bring the Planning Commission minds in on this and let them have a whack at it. What would you think of that? If we kick this back to the Planning Commission?
I say we vote on this thing now, and I'd make a motion if we're anywhere near ready.
If you're willing to make a motion, then make a motion.
Well, I made a motion, we kick it back to the Planning Commission
Okay.
first.
All right, is that a motion?
Yes.
All right, I just want to clarify, are you asking that the home occupation ordinance be sent to the, because the Planning Commission, but let me just make sure, and maybe the city attorney can help me out. My understanding of the function of the Planning Commission is, if a ordinance deals with zoning, then the Planning Commission has a proper place to review. But if we're talking the home occupation ordinance, that's not a zoning issue. That wouldn't necessarily be reviewed by the Planning Commission, right?
Actually, I believe the home occupation ordinance would be, because
Okay.
it's one of the factors that goes into the residential zones and the uses that are allowed. Lisa, you can correct me if you choose to on that.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. So I'm glad I asked. So I just want to make sure that your motion is to review the home occupation ordinance or review the rural residential zonings.
No, I would like them to try to review the home occupation ordinance and see if they can weld it together with the provisional business license.
Is there a second on that idea? Is there a second on that idea? That idea dies at this juncture for the lack of a second motion. Is there an alternative discussion or motion here, Mr. Denver?
I'd like to approve this ordinance as written.
What we're actually doing is we're just getting direction to staff on how to proceed. I think what staff's looking for from us is do we want to leave the home occupation ordinance right now as it is, or do we want to have staff further explore additional changes?
I think what I'm talking about is leaving it as it is.
Okay. Is there a second on that idea?
Second.
All right. Do we need a roll call vote, or do we need is there any objection to leaving it as it is, other than Mr. Furman's? I think I'm going to call for a roll call vote on this direction to staff, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Councilmember August?
We're voting to leave it as it is.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Aye.
Councilmember Furman?
No.
Councilmember Denver?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Edgerton?
Aye.
And Mayor Mann?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that I may have a couple more comments about this when we get into future requests for council members, but at this juncture, we're on to city attorney reports.
In your red folder, there is a listing of the ordinances that in about April of this year, we reviewed with the council and got direction as to corrections and changes and so on that you wish to see. And this is a report updating you as to where we are. First of all, we had a category, and I quote from the report that I believe the mayor put together on this as to his preferences, and everybody signed on to. We had an ordinance called low-hanging fruit. These were ordinances that were prepared, were close to being completed, and just simply hadn't been completed, the process hadn't been completed. Those were the parking ordinance, which is done, the CEQA guidelines, which are done, the noise ordinance, which we presented to you for a first reading, but the planning director noticed that apparently there were inconsistencies with the noise ordinance, between the noise ordinance and the terms of the proposed general plan that are expected to come back. So that is on suspense for the time being. And we have amended it in accord with those general plan provisions, and it will be coming back, but it will start over because there were some issues with the general plan. The Planning Center has given us guidance as to what needs to be done, and we've made those changes, so that will be coming forward. But you did actually see it for first reading, and we're now going to redo it again. So, high priority items were code enforcement revisions. We've had several of those, including we're going on with those, including looking at processing a nuisance abatement ordinance in the future. This is a kind of a continuing evolution. You may recall that initially we didn't have some of the powers that all cities generally have with regard to enforcement, and we now have those. Business license revisions, we did the provisional license ordinance. We also made a change to the license so that it now requires and can enforce compliance with all the codes of the city as a prerequisite to getting a business license. The conflict of interest code we reprocessed because there was a problem in how it was originally adopted. There were also some cleanup items, some errata, where there were basically typos in original ordinances. Temporary sign ordinance has not come forward at all. I don't know quite where planning is on that. I know there's been some interest in pursuing that, but there were, again, wherever the process was, which I believe had to do with the ordinance committee recommendations, there were, again, inconsistencies, as I understand it, with the proposed new general plan. So that's been that's been in a suspense condition.
Can I just that's very important for us to understand because we've been getting numerous inquiries, hey, council, fix this, fix this, fix this. So this kind of changes the game a little bit in terms of how quickly we can get to that if it's predicated on completion of the general plan.
It's not actually predicated on completion. We have some idea of the direction, and so long as we're going in the direction of the general plan, we're okay. But there have been some discussions, and what originally was proposed and was theoretically ready to go has not been in the position to take forward.
Mr. Denver?
I just don't understand what you're saying on this one. It looks to me like you're don't want to say what the reality is. Wasn't it just that there was a lot of people who objected and we just sort of backed off? Where I'm going is...
Not that I'm aware of, but that may be true.
Couldn't we come up with an ordinance and propose it back to us?
If that's...
I would like to suggest if there was a second for that. I know this isn't the right place, but
No, that's okay.
I just
It's
think, you ought to come up with that ordinance. I certainly don't see what it has to do with the general plan and all the things you said, but why don't we just do that, get it over with?
Okay, Lisa, I don't know, you can give me some further background on this, no?
If I might, I'm going to pipe in here because we have already given direction to staff. This is a high priority ordinance, so it's still in the high priority category. But what Mr. August and I have found out by talking to several HOAs in District 1, and even the couple board members from SCCA left, but there's an inconsistency that we have found between the SCCA, the CCNRs, and the signage allowance there versus what the city ordinance is. So that's causing a lot of confusion. That's where the rub is. So that's something that we're gonna have to deal with in short order.
Okay. I would just like to clarify that the information I have is that there is some kind of inconsistency going on. I'm not trying to hide it from you. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
It hasn't come to me.
And let's see, Mr. Johnson, you first.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, members of the council, there's also some inconsistencies with the true temporary sign ordinance for businesses, and along about 3 or 4, maybe even 6 months ago, Mr. Wyman met with several businesses who had some inquiries about how they could put temporary signs and things that possibly were obstructing the public right of way, and we worked with them on some issues on off-site advertising and those. So that is another component to this which needs to be included, just so that we don't forget.
All right, Mr. Denver, then Mr. August.
I simply am saying that all those things need to be worked on. Let's work on them now. Let's do it now.
Okay, Mr. August.
I've been a little bit involved in this. We've had 17 people in this room, and it had to do mostly with temporary signs. But the signs, I've been looking up sign ordinances throughout the country to see why we can't solve our problem. It is a hugely complex problem. Cities have problems with it all the time. We're never going to be able to get it exactly right. If you go down to Giovanni's, where Giovanni's, if you go into that commercial park, you go up to Sun City, there's a number of complaints from some of the store owners there about signs. This is not something we can just, wave a magic wand and we get it done overnight. It's going to be very complicated, and we'll probably never really get it right. So Carmen Cave did mention to me that, yes, we have to propose the sign ordinances in the general plan. She knows more about it than I do. Whether she was right or wrong, I don't know. But this is not an easy one. I just want to let you know that.
Okay, back to you, Ms. Biggs.
Okay. Medium priority, home occupations. That has been brought before you, as you know. We have been asking for direction, and we now have it. Loitering, sexual offender ordinances, there's been no action taken on that. Parolee, probationer ordinances, there's been no action taken on that. These were, again, medium priority matters. Low priority, horse boarding. We have a draft of the horse boarding ordinance. It has not been processed. This was, again, a low priority issue. Personnel rules, we do have a revision of, well, actually it's a creation of personnel rules for the city. It's in draft form, and it will be processed probably in the next month or two. So that's where that is. Unscheduled ordinances, we got sort of assigned some things that hadn't been on the list. Detached underground facilities, as you know, that was processed by the Planning Commission originally and got somewhat delayed and brought back, and it's now been acted upon. Metal containers, there's a moratorium and urgency ordinance that was adopted, in effect pending review of the city standards, and that ultimately will be coming back. And we did a repeal of the county temporary use permit provisions. That was processed, I believe, also as an urgency matter because there was some lack of clarification in there, lack of consistency in there. So we brought that back, and you've acted on that. And that's where we are.
All right. Does that complete your report for tonight?
That completes my report.
Are there any questions from the council? Any additional questions? On to city manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have quite a lengthy report, actually. Finally, an update for you on the general plan and the EIR scheduled update. On July 1st, I created a team to assist in the completion of the draft of the general plan to ensure its delivery not only to the Planning Commission, but City Council for approval. And at that point, found that there was not a detailed listing of what needed to be accomplished, and there was not a task, really a task list that was a checkoff to what needed to be accomplished so that we could finalize the general plan. It was a little concerning after 3.5 years to not see that. So we created that. I created a team consisting of myself, Sean Nelson, your executive consultant, Lisa Gordon, who's our acting planning manager, Jonathan Smith from the Public Works, Jeff Wyman, Charles LeClaire, and Wendy Grant, the principal of the Planning Center, and her team of experts. We meet weekly. We've met weekly since July 1. We meet Mondays. We review project deliverables. We keep on track for the completion of the draft document. To date, we have accomplished significant work in finalizing the draft general plan document in the past 5 weeks. You'll see from our timeline here, this is what we do and how we manage the functions of what we do. We have a staff meeting on Monday. We get a deliverable from the Planning Center. We meet on that deliverable. We complete that deliverable. We give it back to the Planning Center. They put it in a format that we can gather it all together for the elements and get the general plan in position to get that back to council. You can see from July 1 to July 31st, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 items for the general plan were completed. We submitted on time. We delivered the community, we submitted the land use, noise, safety, and housing elements to the Airport Land Use Commission. And if you have any questions about that, I'll have to turn that over to Lisa Gordon because I don't get exactly what they do and why they're doing it. But we had to get those ready for them together to submit them now for their hearing date, September 13th. So to say that the general plan was going to be complete and back to you by September 30th, as you recall a couple weeks ago, was rather ambitious, and we're not able to meet that timeline. It's obvious. The August weekly schedule consists of the following. We're going to initiate the formatting of the web-based general plan. As I don't know whether you know or not, but our general plan is web-based, so the product will be accessible to the public at all times on our website. We'll complete the draft environmental impact report. We'll have the completion of the open space and conservation design element. We'll do a completion of the community design element. We'll do a screen check for all non-traffic related draft EIR sections. We'll have the completion of the draft air quality element. We'll have city council briefings near the end of August. On August 30th, the Planning Center will deliver the public review draft of the EIR to staff for review. September weekly schedule consists of the following. And again, this is a very time-intensive schedule, and I hope you can understand that we've laid this out from start to finish, and really we're keeping a weekly schedule of items that we need to accomplish and check off. We're being very aggressive as possible. We obviously we're not as far along as we thought we were, and we have 6 of us on the team that are keeping each other committed and on the same path. September weekly schedule consists of the first week of September City Council briefings on the draft EIR and notice of mailings. September 13th is the ALUC hearing on land use, noise, safety, and housing elements, and the start of the required 45-day public review period of the draft EIR. September 24th, Planning Commission meeting number 1. September 28th, we plan a public open house on the general plan and the draft EIR. It's a Saturday. We plan a full day workshop to answer questions and have the public come in and view the documents and provide their feedback. Now we're into October. We have a period of time that we have a waiting period there where the 45-day public review period ends. We'll go to Planning Commission meeting number 2 on the 22nd of October. 28th is the close of the mandatory 45-day period. November, we have the draft response to the comments of the EIR. That's going to be about a 2-week turnaround time, which is very quick on gathering all that information and providing it back to us and updating the draft EIR. November 12th, we have Planning Commission meeting number 3. November 20th, we expect to be at City Council for hearing number 1. That would be the Planning Center would also deliver the final EIR. December 4th, we have City Council hearing number 2, the final EIR mailings, and we begin a 10-day agency statutory review period of that document. And December 18th is City Council meeting number 3 to adopt the general plan and certify the EIR. I'll be happy to attempt to answer as many questions as you have. Lisa is also here to provide some backup for me, but this is, again, an aggressive schedule. I know that it could be surprising at how far out this is, but the amount of work and the nature of what we're trying to accomplish has never been put in this format before today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is an eye-opening schedule here, and wow, thank you for fixing this. This is kind of what I think the council would have expected back in February when we extended the contract, but thank you for getting it on track and finding a path to getting our general plan finally done, not next century, as a previous speaker said tonight, but this year. And I think it's so aggressive that, are you sure you really want Lisa to go on maternity leave?
No, we don't. I kidded earlier that she had to get pregnant, get some time off. So that's actually true, probably. So,
Are there any questions from council? Mr. Furman?
This stuff that you reviewed and is finished, are we privy to that information in advance, or do we have to see it all at once when it's done?
we'd prefer that you see it all at once. We're not hiding anything. It's not a public document. It is draft. You're free to look at it, comment on it. The only issue that we have, because the time frame that we have is very aggressive, the idea is that we put the entire package together so there's no misunderstandings and no mistakes. We bring that to Planning Commission. We get their review of it, and we have all of their comments on it, and we bring the same original draft to you without the changes the Planning Commission has requested, so you can see the changes they're requesting and agree or disagree on them, and then we finalize the entire document. So if there's something in particular that you're looking for or to make a comment on now, just remember that it's all in draft form now anyway, so you're going to be able to get to review all of it and make the changes required of you as a team, a policy-setting body.
All right, thank you.
Before you go on to your next point, Mr. Johnson, since we have two commissioners, seated commissioners, and we have the chairman of the commission in here, and we have a new commissioner, and we have all five of us council, I'd just like to encourage all of us as the policy-setting body and process of the city. It's been 5 years to get to this point, and so let's get this done. Let's work together in a collaborative, consensus-building way. If there's disagreements on the commission, if there's disagreements on the council, make your points. Let's agree to disagree and get the general plan done and get it on the street. And the reason why I say this and encourage you in that manner is because once we have the general plan adopted, we have 4 opportunities every year to open it back up and make requisite changes. So let's get this thing done. Wildemar beat us by 1.5 years. Theirs was done at the 3.5-year mark, maybe even 3 years and 2 months. I wonder who the city attorney was at the time. That would be Miss Biggs. But anyway, let's get this done, and that's all I wanted to share with you on that. If we could at least agree to work forward in that method and that way to get this thing done by Christmas time, get it on the street, and then if we want to open it back up, let's open it back up in 2014. Okay, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. 2 other items. The McCall-Sherman Sidewalk Installation Project. We rarely get to share our successes at council, so I just wanted to make sure that you're all aware of this project. I actually drove by the other day and realized it was done. We didn't do a press release. I didn't share it with council. This is the project that was Sherman Road at McCall. This is the sidewalk, and you can see on the left hand on the top, the before picture, there was no sidewalk, and the kids were walking into the street, and they were going around this area. You can see now where there's a sidewalk in there. On the first picture in the middle, you'll see the fencing that we put along that sidewalk, so they can't actually fall or jump into that area. They have to climb the fence and do that, which they might do, but we're hoping to discourage them. And then the other side is the actual ending of the sidewalk at the very east end of McCall, and at the bottom you can see kind of the project area. But this was completed as we said we would complete it prior to the school opening for the year, so we're pretty excited about that.
Nice. Don't feel too bad. Mr. Spoon at Menifee 24/7 let us know it was done.
He's really quick, and he's good at what he does. So thanks for the positive press there, Doug. This is a piece that Terry Willoughby, our finance director, put together. It's a budget in brief. We were able to share it with the finance committee, and they gave their blessing to it. It will be out in the lobby as a handout. And basically what it shows is the budget in brief, the resources, the appropriations, and thanks to Terry for putting that together. And we're just looking to get more of that information out into the public because that's where it belongs. That concludes my report for tonight.
Nice. Thank you, Ms. Willoughby, on that project. It looks really professional I think it'll go a long way to sunshine that process and what our budget truly is in a color and graphical sort of way. Future agenda requests from council members or any other idea, Mr. Denver.
I have several things I want to say. That picture of the sidewalk brings one up that I brought up. We just did a great deal of work on it. I believe, I can't come up with the name of the street, but I believe it's the Arco station. It's to the one side of the sidewalk. And we redid the left and right-hand turn lanes, and we did them all wrong. We did them the same way that it was down at the end of my street, that we corrected. And we didn't make a left-hand turn lane like we did at the end of my street. We just made it the bad way again. And I brought this up once before, and nobody's talking about fixing it again unless there's...
Excuse me, what location?
I actually gave you the street the first time I brought it up, but it's the next street over. It's the street to the east of where the Chinese food place is, that street. It's the next one.
Are you speaking of Menifee Road and Highway 74?
Yeah.
The fix that Edison did?
Yeah.
We're working on that issue.
Yeah, that's terrible. And it stops all the traffic. It's the same problem that we had on Ethonac or in Canto. We need to fix that. That's just a matter of painting. I mean, it's no big deal. The parks, could we, did we ever get settled on the parks issue? Are we, remind me of what happened. Are we gonna handle our parks valley-wide? The county, what happened with the parks?
Your executive consultant, Sean Nelson, that's on his list of things that you've hired him to do, and he's working through that issue. We should most likely give you an update very soon, if you would like that.
Whatever happened with the streets being repaved, the two parts, and the streets being sealed? What happened to all that?
We've done phase 1 and 2 of our resealing project, and we'll come forward soon with phase 3.
We're actually doing some sealing and we're doing some repairs.
Yes, sir. It's part of our CIP project.
On Highway 74, the fence that the county put in is still damaged. Also now a new thing has happened along 74 particularly, and some other places. All that work that they did putting in those plants, particularly on the corner of 74 and the freeway, are now all in disrepair. I hope we're having conversations with the county, since it's in our city, to try and assist them in coming up with a proper solution to those problems.
The conversation that we're having is probably similar to the one that you're having, and the answers that we're getting are similar to the ones that you're getting. Those were done with redevelopment funds. They had an ongoing funding stream to continue that program and that process and all those improvements that were made. If this council wants to set a policy decision to that we should fund that and put money at it to continue to keep those things alive, and if you want to take on the responsibility of the fencing that was put up, again, those are kind of unfunded mandates that we might have as a city because of a former redevelopment area, and I would just need policy direction on that.
It looks like somebody wants to talk about my comments. Can I have them speak on what I was saying and then?
No,
Oh, you're gonna go after me?
they're in the queue.
Okay. There are a number of, being in real estate, there's a number of realtors who have their signs in town. Matter of fact, right now, there's more signs from out of town than there are signs from in town. If this was Paris, if this was Lake Elsinore, if this was Hemet, everybody who had a sign in our town would have to have a business license, or the city would be calling them and saying, take down your signs, you don't have a business license, take down your signs. I would like you, if you would, to consider modifying the ordinances on sign ordinances so that a business who operates in our town has to have a business license.
Just so I'm clear, if a real estate agent has control of a particular home,
Right.
this is what you're talking about, and
Just one example.
right, and their real estate sign is in the front yard of that home.
Right.
We want to make sure they have a business license.
If they have a plumbing sign that says
We're on the same page, correct?
Correct.
Do we have that in our business license ordinance, or business licensing program, Terry?
I'll have to review the specifics, but we have currently not been enforcing that, no.
We'll take that into consideration and bring that back for discussion.
Well,
If it's
not-
part of an ordinance, we'll have to bring it back for policy discussion, but.
And then the last
Well,
thing,
hang on, not till you get a second.
Correct.
Okay, so is anybody going to second that idea to have staff explore that change?
No
I will.
second.
I will second that. Okay.
Thank you.
then the last thing, first, I want to compliment the city for the work that they're doing on the slides that you just showed. I really don't want to put something in here that gets in any way of that. So if this all has to take a back seat until after January, I would understand if you said we got to get the general plan done. You know, don't let me do something here that slows that up. But
I appreciate that. Thank you.
with that in mind, I sure would like to start the discussion of expanding this, actually, it's been discussed before here, but expand the sphere of influence of the city of Menifee, because there's some issues happening with Winchester, there's things happening in Hemet, and we need to have our act together sooner rather than later.
I believe we agree. We're setting up a meeting with Mr. Spiliotis just to inquire about the process.
I'm done. Thank you.
And a
That's plenty.
future staff report on that process down the road. Yeah, excellent. Mr. Denver, are all your arrows gone?
Every single one.
Okay, Mr. Edgerton?
I know that staff gets barraged every now and then in reference to parking. In many cities, as part of their ordinance, in the residential areas, as opposed to perhaps the rural area, it's made very clear that your garage must be accessible for parking. I don't think legally they can make you park in a garage. I don't know of any city that does that. But they do demand that the garages are made available for parking. And they do enforce that in many cities, which takes a load off of parking. And of course, stops people from building another room in their garage or working a business out of their garage. And I don't know if that's part of our ordinance or if we address that in this city. I don't think we do. I know that some of the parking complaints that Kathy had to fend off, who has no control over that sort of thing, bless her heart, but she has to keep taking all of the harassments about it. I don't know that that is in our ordinance. If it is, I would like to know, and if it isn't, I would like to have an evaluation of it.
I don't believe that is in our ordinance. We do have the on-street parking, though, the 72 hours we need to move. We did have the issue with the gentleman. We've met with him several times. Captain Hill's met with him several times. Sergeant Rodriguez has met with him several times. And several of our lieutenants have, as well as Colin McNee, who offered to have code enforcement handle that issue, since we're really trying to save our police officers to catch the bad guys, not the people parking in front of people's houses that don't move their cars every 72 hours. But I don't believe specifically what you've just asked about is in our ordinance.
Well, if you would take a look at that, most, as I understand it, and most of them are larger cities, but they find that very beneficial in keeping people from running businesses out of their garage, from converting them into another room in the house, and most especially making sure that there's less of an issue as far as accessibility for parking in the residential areas.
All right, thank you, Mr. Edgerton. Mr. August?
As long as we're putting our wish list together, this will be real quick. Can you let us know, as far as your slurry seal program, your road improvement program, what the estimates are for probably working on Marietta Boulevard from, say, McCall to Newport? And also, maybe you could help us out a little bit over in District 1 with the shopping center, the commercial center, or whatever. Is there any way we can work with the owners of the property over there and perhaps put a little pressure on them, see what they can do about the condition of the pavement and the parking lots over there? We're getting some complaints about people possibly tripping over the curbs. I know it's hard for them to do that. But, and one last thing, and there's no hurry on this, maybe you can get us together with the owners of the golf course, of California Golf and Arts. Let's find out what their plans are for that golf course over there, if you would. You can send me over and whatever, I'll do that.
Great, be happy to get that information for you.
Any other council member updates or agenda items? I want to thank the council and I want to thank staff for a robust meeting tonight and a healthy, meaningful, and courteous and respectful debate of the issues. That's how we should be getting things done around here, and I'm very appreciative of that. Down the road, though, and I'm going to focus. My main focus is going to be the general plan from here till December. So I'm not going to add any agenda items now, but I think that what we probably do need to look at the rural residential overlay, perhaps down the road, in an effort to, as we discussed in 12.4 earlier, seeking ways to further enhance the ability of some of our rural business owners to come into compliance. I mean, there's a process now, but Ms. Biggs, you mentioned it in your staff report, so I think if you keep that on your downrange list of things for us to consider after we approve the general plan, I think that'd be a smart thing to do. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
All right. Thank you very kindly. Our next meeting is Wednesday, August 21st, and our meetings will be on Wednesdays here on out until December, and we'll assess how effective they were for us and the staff and you all. And if we need to go back to Tuesdays, we can go back to Tuesdays. But our trial run of Wednesdays starts August 21st. We are adjourned.